Welcome back. My name is James. I'm here with.
Austin Bowers from Methodical Coffee.
Yeah, we're here today in the roasting headquarters area, specifically back here with the bags of green. And yeah, just here to learn about Austin's experience in coffee and working with Methodical and everything in between.
Yeah. Thanks for having me,
Yeah,
James.
thanks for coming on.
I appreciate being here and glad we get to have some climate controlled green coffee back here as
Heck
well.
yeah. Especially in here, it can get hot in the
Yes,
roastery.
yes, for sure, for sure.
Cool deal. Well, I would love to learn more about what initially got you into coffee
Yeah,
and maybe your experience leading up to working at Methodical.
sure. So for me, coffee kind of feels like it was always meant to be. And a little bit of why I see it like that is has to do more with my story. So I grew up overseas. I was actually born in Ecuador,
No way.
Peru, and then I lived in Peru, and then I moved to Colombia. But in Ecuador, our landlords and like my quote unquote adopted grandparents were actually coffee brokers. So in the basement of the apartment that we lived in, they had their little business buying and selling coffee. And this was
Cool.
like in the 90s. So this like, you know, before I ever knew anything about specialty coffee,
Hmm.
before I even like cared about coffee itself or anything. So my brother and friends and I used to play on like these sacks of what I now know as green coffee. It was actually coffee like in parchment, so before it's milled.
Hmm.
So funny enough, like the smell of this room and the smell of coffee in general is very nostalgic to me.
That's so cool.
Even before it's roasted, which is funny because a lot of people have like allergies to it
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But so hold on to that thought about like my upbringing. And we were always around coffee in the sense of people always served coffee growing up. It
Mm.
was very much part of the cultural experience in Latin America to like drink coffee after a meal and hang out and just have conversations over coffee. It's a very social beverage there.
Hmm.
Um, and I knew like my dad drank coffee growing up and he had his French press and he always had to have a cup of coffee every day. But I kind of just saw it as like, oh, this is like an adult beverage and sometimes I can have it with milk. And I didn't really know anything about it. And I don't even remember like drinking black coffee for the first time. I remember drinking like café con leche
Mm.
growing up. But my like first experiences with coffee as like a specialty beverage or specialty product was in college. I went to school in Virginia and just like I think one exam weekend, I decided to start drinking the cafeteria coffee. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I see how it gives me more energy. And I think I pulled like my first all nighter of college drinking coffee. And something about that just like sparked a flame where I was like,
Mm.
okay, coffee's a cool thing. Um, and then I used to go to like some cafes with some friends and my now wife, who was my girlfriend back then. We would study at cafes and the Muse Coffee Company, which is in Lynchburg, Virginia,
Mm.
had like a bottomless drip, and they usually had two
Oh.
different types of drip coffee. And so I, thinking about like budget reasons, was like, I'm gonna
Mm.
pay $5 for the bottomless drip and sit here for as long as I can. Um, and the idea that they had two different drips very, very much like intrigued me because I
Yeah.
was like, oh, how can coffee taste different? Like, doesn't all coffee taste the same? What makes it taste different? At the time, the Muse did some like flavored coffees. So there'd be like, coconut cream or like Christmas in a cup and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, so this is different than like this washed Sumatra
Mm.
or wet hold Sumatra that you have or this Colombian coffee. And I understood that. But the concept of coffee tasting differently based on where it was from is kind of what led me on this rabbit hole of like exploring specialty coffee. And every now and then I pop my head out of the ground and look back at that rabbit hole and think like, oh wow, I've turned something that was like an interest and then a hobby and into a profession.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. Cool deal. Well, so with like your interest being piqued there
Yeah,
and then entering into coffee as a profession,
for sure.
how did you get your foot in the door and what did your
Yeah.
progression leading up to working at Methodical look like?
Yeah. So I think this would have been my sophomore year
Mm.
in college. I had had some different like part-time jobs in college and during the summer. But I came back from my like freshman summer break, and I was like, I want to work. Oh, I want to check out this coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
And this new coffee shop that had opened was called Third Wave Coffee.
Gotcha.
They're now called Kinship, and they're in Forest, Virginia. And I had really good conversation with the owner there, Jimmy
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, and he originally wanted to open some coffee shops in China, and
Oh,
for
wow.
different health reasons, he wasn't able to.
Mm-hmm.
So we connected like both on the like passion of like serving people, but also like coffee as like an interest of his. And he was like very much ahead of me in terms of like he had been roasting coffee already, he had been learning about it, brewing about it. And so I was just fascinated by like the knowledge behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't hiring at the moment because it was like the first year or two of them being open. And so I was thinking like, oh, I really want to work in this. It seems like it'd be a cool part-time
Mm-hmm.
job. So I started learning about coffee online. I took like a SCA course on green coffee.
Gotcha.
And then another company, the Muse that I mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
was hiring for like barista positions. And so I went to like a group interview. And at the end of the group interview, Brian Wynn, the owner, like pulled me aside and was like, hey, do you think about learning how to roast coffee? And so I was like, kind of taken aback at
Yeah.
first. I was like, this is crazy. I thought I had to be a barista first. I thought I had to know more about coffee before doing this. So he took me under his wing for a few months,
Mm-hmm.
and I started doing like production roasting. I wasn't making the profiles that we follow, but I was just repeating the profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And that like was a really cool first experience as like a coffee job.
Yeah.
Fast forward a little bit, I was studying social work, and I had an internship coming up, and I wasn't gonna be able to work as much as I was working as a production roaster.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to shift to like a part-time basis.
Gotcha.
So I started working at the University of Lynchburg's cafe, which was run by the Muse,
Mm-hmm.
super part-time, like once or twice a week. And then I was still a regular at like other coffee shops in town, like Third Wave and then the White Hart and different shops like that in Virginia. And I was just exploring coffee like in my dorm and brewing coffee. I remember brewing like an AeroPress, but I didn't have a kettle or anything. So I would heat up my water with a coffee maker and then use an AeroPress. And like, I was like, this is not as good as what I can get like at these other shops that
Yeah.
are focused on specialty. And that just pushed me to like try to find a job in specialty
Mm-hmm.
coffee, really. So it was more from the standpoint of like a hobby and a aficionado, and coffee tasting really good when it's really well done.
Yeah.
That just like pushed me into wanting to learn more about coffee.
That's awesome. So, two follow-up questions with that.
Yeah.
What then started the move to Greenville,
Yeah.
and where in your story did you start looking into competition coffee?
Okay. Those are really good questions. So, college, I was still working at the Muse, super part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And then every now and then I was nagging Jimmy at Third Wave about a job, or like asking him like if he'd be hiring at any time. Um, and that opportunity actually came after I graduated from college.
Okay.
I believe it would have been like June of 2018 when I started working at Third Wave.
Mm-hmm.
And Third Wave was like a roaster and cafe. The roaster was inside the cafe.
Cool.
So you could like stand at the bar to order your coffee and turn around and you could see the roaster. So it was a really cool experience because
Yeah.
people would come in and like ask like, oh, what are you doing over there? And a lot of people in that area had not seen like a coffee roaster like that one before.
Yep.
It was a Diedrich, I think a 5 kilo Diedrich.
Okay.
So it's just a really cool experience to go
Yeah.
in there and like see the roasted coffee, interact with the baristas, get the finished product. And they did a lot of like education and classes early
Mhm.
on. So I started working there as just a barista.
Gotcha.
And through a few different steps and different people leaving, I ended up being someone that had interest in staying for a while
Mhm.
and started working as like a manager or bar lead, and just started gaining more experience by like immersion, really,
Mm.
just learning from other people that worked there. And something that was really special about Third Wave was like people who sat at the bar, like you could get the drink that you ordered, but we'd oftentimes like share pour overs with them. So we'd make a pour over of something else, or if Jimmy was making an espresso or dialing in an espresso, he'd give them out for people to try. So there was always this natural intrigue from
Yeah.
people of like, oh, what are you doing? Like, what is this coffee? Or what is this seasonal beverage you're working on? Um, so I worked there for a few months, actually about like 9 months before they were going to go on an origin trip to Guatemala.
Cool.
And I got to go on that trip with a few coworkers. And I think it was actually on that trip that the owner was like, hey, what do you think about becoming the manager of the shop? Because we're going to need a manager because the current one's leaving in a few months. And that got me in the door of like managing people and customer service and like inventory management.
Yep.
And then that slowly like led into me wanting to take over doing quality control. So I learned how to cup at Third Wave.
Okay.
And like calibrated to like the SCA 2004 form and how people cup coffee. And it was a very like intriguing experience because it just fascinated me that there was a way to track quality and what people thought about coffee. And we used to host like public cuppings for people, and we were always cupping coffee.
Yeah.
And so we had a roaster who was roasting, and I think I roasted for like one day for a Third Wave, and I was gonna plan on doing like roasting, QC, and managing a shop, but that was way too much work for one person to take on.
Yeah.
So we ended up hiring a roaster, and I partnered with a roaster to do the QC.
Gotcha.
For the roasted coffee, and then that allowed us to do QC for the cafe very easily as well.
That makes sense.
So I worked there for a few years and gained experience as like a barista, as a manager, doing quality control, and I was always looking like towards the idea of becoming a Q grader one day, which, to like simplify what Q graders do, is it's kind of viewed as like the sommelier,
Right.
but in the coffee world. So they're in charge of like scoring coffee all the way from green coffee to roasted coffee, and knowing about the defects, knowing about the process it goes through, and being able to identify in a cup of coffee the quality of that coffee. So that just led naturally with a few coworkers and I to get into competing in coffee.
Gotcha.
So we had been like watching videos and geeking out about different people's recipes online and just different things that we would have done in like social media back then. And then we saw that there was going to be a competition, like a preliminary round in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
And that was really close to where we lived. So a few of us signed up to compete at Blanchard's for what is called U.S. Coffee Champs, or was called at that point U.S. Coffee Champs, for their preliminary round. And so in the world of competition in the U.S., the preliminary round is the round before regionals.
Gotcha.
Then after regionals, there's nationals. And that's been restructured over the years a few different times. And some of those rounds have been removed and then added back. But this is like a way for us to get our foot in the door of like competing in coffee.
Yeah.
So like we downloaded the rule book, we signed up, we learned what we had to do, we watched some routines, and then we showed up at Blanchard's and did our best that we could do.
That's awesome.
Naturally, there was some failure in that. I remember for myself, one of the things that I did that at the time didn't seem like against the rules, but now with the experience I have is very much against the rules. Before I brewed the coffee for the judges, I wanted to present them like a full experience of coffee. So I had them sniff the dry grounds. But there's a rule in the rule book that says you can't present to the judges any aromatic or sensory experience except the brewed coffee.
Interesting.
This is for brewer's cup specifically, not for like barista. Barista has a little bit more leeway on like sensory experiences.
That makes sense.
Basically for these preliminary rounds, different roasteries donate a coffee to compete with.
Oh, cool.
And when you show up, you get to cut the coffee and then choose what coffee you're going to use. So I remember being very nervous about that because like we had recipes that could work with different coffees and we had practiced like a rough idea of what we wanted to talk about, but we were very much like starting out in competition. And so we had no idea really what we were doing.
Yeah.
my friend Steve Kim,
Mm.
who now works at Grace Street Coffee Roasters,
Cool. Yeah.
and I decided to compete together.
Mm.
And so we went up to Richmond and we cupped some coffee, and there was a really nice like natural Burundi, I believe, from Recluse. And then I really can't remember the other coffees right now. That's not even the coffee that I used. I can't even remember which coffee I used.
Yep.
Actually, it'll come back to me eventually.
No worries.
But we cupped the coffee, we chose which coffee we wanted to use, and then you have practice time with that
Okay.
coffee. It's limited, or it was limited at that point, to like 25 minutes or 30 minutes. And so ideally you're like dialing in that coffee during your practice, but you're also like giving your speech so that you feel comfortable on the stage. And then you have to leave that coffee there. So there's no more like dialing in that evening or the next day before you compete.
Oh man.
So I really don't remember like the actual presentation, besides just like a few vague memories of like being behind the stage and serving coffee.
Yeah.
And I do remember breaking that rule about like serving aromatics to the judge. And so at the end of it all, when they called like the lineup of how everyone scored, I wasn't expecting to like place or move on or anything. And I think I was towards the very bottom because of this disqualification from a rule that I broke. It didn't completely like disqualify me,
Okay.
but it was enough points removed that it like really hurt my chances of even placing. And we were like reading through the rules at the end and trying to figure out how it broke that rule. And we like got feedback from the judges afterwards. And at that time, if I was able to like give advice to my younger self, it would have been to like spend more time asking the judges more questions to know more about how competition works.
Fair.
And that's very much encouraged nowadays for like the deliberation time for people to take advantage of that. There's not really any shame. It's like can feel kind of weird sometimes to go up to someone and be like, so why did you score me like this?
What did I do wrong?
But every judge I've ever interacted with has been very open to giving feedback.
Gotcha.
And they like being competition judges for a reason, and they want to see people succeed. Yeah. So that's kind of how I and Steve got into competing coffee. We were working together on bar. This event was going to happen, so we signed up. And I believe Steve placed far enough ahead that he automatically qualified for regionals.
Oh wow.
And then the regional round there was 2 that year. The one that we attended was in Nashville. And you could automatically qualify by participating in a preliminary, or you could wait for an open registration period.
Gotcha.
And so I waited for the open registration period since I had not qualified, and I got a spot. And that competition I remember more about in Nashville because it was more personal to me, because I got to pick the coffee I was going to compete with. And I chose a eco-pulped Ethiopia from a washing station called Jet Hama,
Okay.
which is in Kosher, Ethiopia.
Gotcha.
And I went into the idea of like sharing about like equality across the supply chain and the importance of everyone across the supply chain, and just sharing this like floral and sweet and delicious like Ethiopian coffee.
That's so cool.
And that was a really cool experience. And I ended up placing at that regionals, which means I got to move on to nationals. And that national round was hosted in 2020 in Costa Mesa, California.
Cool. What time of year?
That was like February. And I remember that because I
That's
went
good.
right before everything shut down. I think we got back to Virginia, and like a few weeks later, everything just started to shut down. And nationals went well, except that I went overtime.
Gotcha.
And that's always been like my biggest enemy in competition is like talking for too long or making a mistake on bar that has cost me my time, and then I have to call time afterwards. So I think I placed second to last because I was at 10 seconds overtime. And for every second you're overtime, they start like knocking points off your score.
Oh man.
But it was a really cool experience to like
I'm
be in
sure.
California for the first time, watch these like national competitors and people who've done it for years.
Yeah.
And that was the year that like Alika Lifty from Onyx won,
Gotcha.
and Lance Hedrick got second place.
Dang.
And then I think it was Wei Hong from Texas competed as
It's a
well,
star-studded lineup.
and a few other people that I
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, these people like really know what they're doing. They've been professionals for a long time.
Yeah.
People you look up to. They may not be like famous people outside of the bubble of coffee,
But
but they're
inside.
definitely inside that bubble famous.
That's awesome.
And that was my first experience like in Nashville and in California with like an expo type event, because those competitions used to be held in tandem with like an event.
Right.
So
Wasn't Barista in at the same time as World of Coffee this year?
not at the one in San Diego. So
Okay.
San Diego, they hosted the World Latte Art Championship.
That's what it was. Okay.
So right after California in 2020, like COVID happened and everything started shutting down. Our cafe like originally shut down like all our operations. And then maybe a few days later, we figured out we could still make like bulk lattes and deliver cold brew and beans to people. And so a few of us were still doing that.
Sure.
And then we started doing like service at the door, no sit in. And then eventually it was service. You could come in and take your coffee to go. And then eventually it was like fully back open.
Yeah.
All of that time is a blur because not only was it like COVID, but I also had my first kid.
Oh man.
And all of that time just like has crunched together. And it seems so like soon that it happened, but also like a whole lifetime ago.
Yeah.
So after all that, after like the reopening of the cafe, and we like had a really good, like I would say almost star lineup of baristas that were really like bought into the concept of like serving people coffee and giving them excellent customer service. We slowly started to like spread out and like leave, because where we were in Lynchburg is very much like a college town, and to seek like the type of careers that we wanted to have, we wanted to either like move away and work for other companies, or some of us decided to follow other paths. And that just like naturally started to happen. And I was kind of one of the last ones from like that group of like people that worked for Third Wave. I ended up moving to Greenville in 2022 to be closer to my family and my parents who live in Hartwell, Georgia.
Cool.
So I think in 2021 they moved back from living overseas and they moved to Hartwell, Georgia, about an hour away from here.
Yeah.
And my wife Lindsay and I were about to have our second child, and we were trying to be closer to family. And we looked at like Atlanta and Asheville and Greenville, but we were really intrigued with Greenville because we had been to Greenville a few times in college just because we were driving through to visit my family. And even after college, we had been through, and we knew that there was like a good coffee culture here.
Yeah.
So even before I lived here, I still had this concept of Greenville being like a slept-on coffee city with like a really cool cafe culture. And I had heard of Methodical, and I had been to Methodical maybe one other time previously. But we ended up landing on moving to Greenville because of the city, but also with the hopes of like being able to work in green coffee.
Yeah.
So even when I lived in Virginia, I already had in my mind the idea of wanting to work with people because of my experience with social work, but also wanting to work on the green coffee and sourcing side because of my upbringing and being fluent in Spanish. And that just like really intrigued me, like the idea of like sourcing coffee and being able to travel and just connecting with people. And at the time, Ally, which is an importer of coffee, has some offices here. And Unblended, run by Lucas and Sophia Quadros, had actually started here.
I did not know that.
So Unblended started with Lucas, who was studying at Clemson as a business student. And
I did not know he went to
Unblended
Clemson.
itself was like the culmination of his thesis or his final project on like importing coffee to the United States. And so when he graduated, he decided to launch it as a full program.
I had no clue who went to Clemson.
And I'm of course missing a lot of details because it's not my own story to
fair,
tell.
very fair.
But Methodical was Lucas's first customer back in the day when it got started.
That's so cool.
And I think Lucas maybe worked a few bar shifts at some of our cafes at some point.
Sure.
But he got connected to us because our downtown cafe is next to the business apartment, Clemson, which is in downtown Greenville.
Yep.
Um, so I think before we even moved, I had interviewed with Unblended because they were hiring their first salesperson. And in my mind, the way to get into green coffee was to get into the sales side.
Fair.
Because a lot of green coffee, like you're either working in a lab as a lab assistant and you're like grading samples, roasting samples, sending them out. You're working in sales, or you're working in the sourcing side. Or you might be like you might be someone that's managing other roasters' inventory for them
Yeah.
in the sense of their green inventory. And you're a trader, so basically you buy and sell coffee to manage their inventory. So it was a very much like, how do I like get into this culture? How do I get into this? Because I know I want to do that, but I don't know where to start. And so I got experience doing QC at Third Wave, and I knew I wanted to become a Q grader because that would make the barrier to entry a little bit lower.
For sure.
And then I thought, well, maybe I can get into sales, even though I've never done sales before. I was like, I can learn sales. I can be a friendly person. And I have this personal connection to just like coffee in general. And Unblended did not hire me, but I had a really good conversation with Lucas and Sophia during that interview that I think really like kept me going and increased that interest in green coffee. And so when it came time to move and choosing where to move, we decided on Greenville because I was like, maybe something will open up with Unblended.
Yeah.
Because at the time they were based here and they were living here. Or maybe something will open up with Ally because they had a lab here, make some connections. And I had like decided to try to work at Methodical. So I called and got an interview with the owners and with the manager at the time. I applied online and just had really good conversations with all of them, in which like I also explained like, hey, my end goal is to work in green coffee. This is what I want to do. This is my experience. And I'm moving from a different state, a different city. You know, what type of jobs like are open right now? At the time, I thought I was just applying to like be a barista because I was thinking like just get my foot in the door,
For sure.
start working as a barista, and then make connections from there. I ended up coming on as like a shift lead at first instead of a barista because they had a need for like someone with a little bit more leadership in their shops. And so that's how I got started at Methodical.
Yeah.
Was as like what's now considered probably a bar lead at our downtown cafe.
Gotcha.
And that would have been March of 2022.
Okay.
And that's how I ended up in Greenville.
That's
working
so
at Methodical.
That's wild. Okay, so since you started on like the cafe side of things, what then was that progression from cafe side to roasting side?
Yeah, for sure. So that would have been March of 2022. And I believe in the fall of 2022, I decided to take my Q grading like certification in class. And because I knew that was like a personal goal of my own. We had been saving up some money to put towards that because it was just like a professional goal.
Yeah.
And so I went to Charleston. I stayed at a hostel in Charleston by myself for a week. And I would walk every morning to Balzac, which is an importer of coffee in Charleston, and I was taking the class and doing the tests for it.
That's so cool.
And at the end of this 6 days of classes and tests, I had passed everything except for one cupping. And this was one of those tests of the, like, at the time it was 19 different tests. Now I think it's like over 20 tests that you take. It was one of those that you couldn't retake the same week that you take the course.
Oh, man.
You had to come back at a later date, which meant I had not gotten my Q certificate, but I was so close to achieving it. And like in February, I went back to Balzac. I just had to do that one cupping and I got my Q certification. So that was February of 2023. And I was still working bar shifts. I was the point person for like leadership on our team on bar, kind of setting the standards for like our service and the standards for our coffee quality, and, you know, making sure all of that was implemented in our cafes. I wasn't setting the actual standards, but like our manager and our trainer at the time were training baristas, and I was assisting and making sure we're all doing it the same way
Hmm.
in our downtown cafe.
Awesome.
Um, and I think how I like ended up making the jump to like the roastery side of
Hmm.
things was Will came to me and said he was considering looking for someone to take over some of the like sourcing side of what he
Hmm.
did. Um, and that he would let me know when he had written a job description and was putting it online for someone to apply to. So fast forward like a few months and working on bar, and then all of a sudden this job posting was made
Hmm.
available for like a green coffee buyer for Methodical. It was a part-time job, like 2 days a week. And I applied, I interviewed, and I got it. And I started working here just at the roastery a few days a week. And then the rest of my time, I was working as a barista at our downtown cafe.
That's awesome.
So because of the job over here, I didn't feel comfortable being a shift lead
Mm.
and working over here because the shift lead would have been more involved on the day-to-day basis. Um, and so I was doing barista shifts and then 2 days a week coming up here and like learning from Will, like how do we source coffee? What do we do? What relationships do we already have?
Mm.
Just learning like everything about the position.
That's so cool.
And that proved to be complicated to work in two different buildings for the
Mm.
same company. And pretty quickly we had the need and we made the transition for me to like roast and do green coffee wine.
Fair.
And since I had experience roasting, was comfortable with roasting equipment, that was a very natural like option.
For sure.
And it not only helped our production, but it helped me and my sanity to know like, okay, I'm going to the same place every
Yeah.
day. We're gonna work on these things.
That's fair.
So I was a production roaster for probably a few months at
Mhm.
Methodical, and then gradually became just the green coffee buyer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Coolio. So with that transition into now being fully on roasting ops side,
Yeah.
was there anything that you missed about being more customer facing in the cafes?
I think so. Every now
Mhm.
and then I have this thought that like I miss serving people coffee
Mhm.
because of like my upbringing and who I am. I've always been about like serving other people.
For sure.
And so, and then because I had worked in coffee for a while, I was so used to working with customers.
Mm.
And even though there was this like inevitable burnout of like customer service and quote unquote putting on a show for people all the
Mhm.
time, um, I still miss it. I still miss like being able to make someone's day with like beautiful latte art or provide them like exceptional service and going like all the way to like, giving them the full customer service experience, a breakdown of the menu and an excellently crafted drink and, bringing it to their table and just like making sure they had a great experience. I miss that every now and then.
Yeah.
Um, I don't miss the like social strain of always being customer facing.
Yeah.
Because it felt like I didn't have social energy outside of work.
That makes sense.
But I do miss serving people coffee and greeting them as they came through the door and, having all these like miniature conversations throughout the day with people, getting to know our regulars and have conversations with them. That's definitely something I miss, but I can kind of like channel that energy towards people that we buy coffee from
Yeah.
and having conversations with them on the phone or when we get to visit them or they visit us, but also just every day at the roastery, making coffee for people still, whether it's like cupping or making a pour over, or every now and then someone in the office will ask me to make them a latte. So I still get like little tastes of like working on bar. Some of those have happened at trade shows, like the one in San Diego last weekend. So getting to work on a coffee bar there for a few different companies like Breville and then for Unblended and for Balzac, that gives me some of that taste of like, okay, I do miss customer service some, but I'm glad that I don't do this every day of my life.
Yeah. That's very fair.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What does, just as we were talking about like serving people within the roasting facility, what does like continued education look like here at Methodical?
Yeah. So Laura, who is our educator, has created a full training program for our baristas
Cool.
that they have to go through.
Hmm.
But along with that, there's also different seminars and classes that are offered online and then sometimes offered in person. And I think we offer a few every quarter.
Okay.
It's not required
Hmm.
whatsoever, but anyone in the company can sign up and attend those
Hmm.
seminars. And some of the seminars in the past have been like exploring the flavor wheel and sensory science, learning how to cup coffee, an advanced espresso training class. I think some of the newer classes are like origin focused, so they're like learning more about coffee origins. So the first one was like Latin America. There's one
Cool.
on Africa. I'm not going to remember all the classes that Laura has worked on in the
Very fair.
workshops, but there is that side of like
Mhm.
continued education. And there's also this encouragement for anyone in like any position really at Methodical to like keep learning about things that will help them succeed in their position
Yeah.
specifically. So like one side of continued education for me was 2 years ago, or maybe a year ago now, the yeah, a little bit over a year now, the CQI, which is Coffee Quality Institute,
Okay.
handed over the Q grading certification to the SCA. They
Gotcha.
licensed it out to them, and the SCA took that and created what we now know as the Coffee Value Assessment,
Okay.
which is used as the form for people who are pursuing becoming a Q grader now.
Hmm.
So anyone who was already a Q grader before the CVA launched, like myself, had to go and learn how to use the CVA form to
Oh.
then become what they were calling evolved Q graders, which is just like a funny term to me. I don't know. It makes me
Yeah.
laugh every time.
Feels like Pokemon.
Yeah, I guess I'm on my second level of evolving as a Q grader Pokemon. So that continued education was going once again to Balzac in Charleston
Okay.
and learning from Tracy and Thomas.
Hmm.
Tracy works for Balzac, and then Thomas is like an independent coffee educator
Oh wow.
who does Q grading classes, CVA classes,
Mm.
and then all kinds of other like education like that. Tracy heads up the logistics and education at Balzac in Charleston, and so she's now a Q instructor and does different classes like that locally in Charleston.
Cool.
So my continued education was making sure I kept my certification as a Q grader.
No.
So I got to take that class. And then I try to take all the classes that Laura creates and puts out there.
Yeah.
One of the best ones in recent memory was the educational class on tea.
Ooh.
And part of my job is like sourcing and making sure we have the inventory for tea.
Mhm.
But even that, I feel like I'm just still learning about tea.
Fair.
Because I've had years to learn about coffee.
Yeah.
And tea has kind of always been in the periphery of that. So we had Caitlin from Royal, New York,
Mhm.
which is an importer in New York. But Caitlin operates all their tea program.
Gotcha.
So she came down here to do like a visit, and Laura had her do a class that was open to everyone. And I think like 16 people showed up, which is like a really good turnout for
Yeah.
those classes. And we just tasted and learned about tea together.
That's so cool.
So I know Laura's putting a lot of thought and effort into like continued education.
Mhm.
And then each individual manager and like bar lead at Methodical is tasked with making sure that like the baristas are like up to date with like menu prep,
Mhm.
our standards, and we're all following the same standards.
Yeah.
But really, Laura's like heading up that effort.
That's so cool. So with that, well, I guess I want to pivot more into like the sourcing side.
Yeah, for sure.
So as you've grown in your role here, how have you been able to, I guess, cultivate those relationships with producers and different importers,
Yeah.
just across the board?
So up until Methodical, well, up until I came on as like a green coffee buyer at
Mhm.
Methodical, I think we had done like a few trips to Origin, but the person doing the sourcing was Will, who was
Yep.
one of the owners, and he didn't have the bandwidth travel and like visit all the people that we work with.
Mm.
Because he was heading up both wholesale and green coffee buying. Um, so that was a lot for him to handle. I was just making sure Ty didn't need any coffee from over here. um, so with that, with having someone else come on to like the green coffee like sourcing team in general, we've had more bandwidth for us to travel and visit people we work with. And that's probably the like pinnacle of like cultivating relationships is
Yeah.
when we're invited to someone's farm or invited to someone's lab and we get to cup coffee with them in the country where they grow the coffee, visit their farm, meet their family. But like behind that or besides that, there's this like weekly and monthly like calling people, keeping up with emails, trying to be someone that is personable and is interested in like what these people do in coffee. So in general, like Will and I have always wanted this program and us as buyers to be like family oriented and like focused on the relationship aspect. We didn't want it to feel transactional, like, hey, I'm just giving you this money and you're giving me this coffee and don't give me any more details.
Yeah.
That's it. We wanted it to feel very much like hospitality focused.
Yeah.
So when we get the chance to host people here who are like salespeople or they're actually producers of coffee coming to the United States, we love to like post people and show them around and brew coffee with them and eat out different places. And every now and then we might have a cultural exchange experience in the United States, whether it's like going to Paris Mountain or eating barbecue, stuff like that. But a lot of it is just spending time like on the phone, and whether that's like sending a voice message to someone or actually having like a phone conversation with them. We want to like know coffee producers for more than just their creator of like a product that or a raw material.
Yeah.
We can't always like say that we're friends with these people. We would like to be friends with these people that we buy coffee from, because we want to partner with them and we want to make sure that how we source coffee is equitable. So ideally people can just do what they want to do in coffee and, you know, have a livelihood from that.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do with an agricultural product like coffee.
For sure. For sure. What's one experience that you've had like while you've been either visiting Origin or while you've been hosting producers here that has just kind of been like a reminder of like, this is definitely the field for me?
Yeah. I think back to my most recent trip to Colombia. It was one of my shorter trips, but it was focused on Unblended and their development camp. And this development camp that they have each year, twice a year for producers, is a time for people who are part of their program, specifically young producers, sometimes mentors who are older, to come and just like be all in the room together, learning from an importer, learning from other producers, learning from people who've been invited out from outside the country who are roasters or baristas who work for coffee companies. So ahead of that like development camp, we had been purchasing coffee from Sarah Tabone, and we started buying her coffee a few years ago because of a different development camp. But at this most recent one, it was the first time we got to go to her family farm. So it wasn't even on the schedule for us to go to her farm. And we were in Antioquia, which is a region in Colombia. And we were in the specific city of Andes, which used to be it and still is a really big coffee producing region.
Yeah.
Andes used to have the largest cooperative of coffee in all of Colombia. So driving there, you see coffee farms all over the place. And we spent some good time at Carolina Ramirez's farm doing some like processing experiments. So everyone in the development camp was divided up into teams that included like mentors, visitors like myself, current producers, and anyone else that was there. And we got to take coffee and decide how we wanted to process it. And there was some like rules and like leeway on like what we were supposed to do with it. But we were all given, I believe, either Seni Cafe or Colombia variety of coffee, and we were given 20 kilos of whole cherry, and we could decide like all the steps from there. But the rules were like it needed to be a scalable process. It needed to use stuff that was already available at the farm, and then obviously because we were only there for a weekend, we needed to give instructions for Carolina and her family and the people that work at her farm to carry out.
Cool.
So different teams did different things, and the team that I was on was headed up by Andres Martinez, who is a producer from Cauca, and he's pretty well known for like co-fermented coffees and process forward coffees. He has a background in like bioengineering.
Oh, wow.
And he used to work for another like famous coffee producer in Cauca, so he had a lot of experience in processing coffee that is not like traditional processing. So we took like 20 kilos of cherries, and we decided to first dry it as a natural.
Okay.
And so we put it into a shaded dryer on some raised beds. And while I was doing that, we went and collected mandarin leaves from a tree.
Oh.
And we took someone else's spent cherries, so they had basically they had sorry, I'm forgetting my words. They had pulped this coffee. So we took the coffee pulp itself, the cherry skin from someone else's, and we mixed it with the mandarin leaves, and we mixed it with molasses and hot water, and we made this like concoction that would hopefully get inoculated by the yeast in the molasses. And after 3 days of drying the coffee as a natural, that coffee would be rehydrated for a few hours, pulped, and then dried. Our thesis, or hypothesis, I should say, was that this coffee would get like the fermentation from being a natural, which is start to decompose the like precursors for flavor, but then also we would add new flavors to it from like the mandarin leaf, the molasses having sugar and yeast in it, and the coffee cherry also having like its own like biology that was going on to hopefully add some like funkiness to it.
Yeah.
So we still haven't tried the product of that. No one's tried the products of those. So I'm looking forward to trying that.
Yeah.
But specifically from that trip, along with us trying coffees with the producers, different producers from Unblended supply chain were able to like turn in coffees to be a part of this cupping competition where buyers and producers pick their top 3, and the winners are getting to go to like World of Coffee in Panama with Unblended. So one of the days that we were there was a Saturday morning before all these events are happening. Sarah, Maria Paula, a few people from Unblended, and 2 other producers from a different part of Colombia. We all piled into a car together and went to Sarah and Maria Paula's family farm, which is in the Santa Rita community in Andes, Antioquia. And I think it took us like, probably like 45 minutes to an hour to go there. But like I wasn't really paying attention to the time. But I understood why like the camp couldn't happen there, because it was more removed than like one of Carolina's farms, and it was harder to get to. But it was just like a beautiful experience because I got to meet her parents for the first time, and we went into the Santa Rita like community, and they had this like old plaza, and her dad was just like talking to these old men in the plaza and chatting up anyone that walked in. We were joking, and like some other people were joking that like he seemed to be like the unofficial mayor of Santa Rita. And they invited us to go to their farm, to their house, and see like where they grow the coffee and where they process the coffee. So we got to walk around the coffee plots itself, and then we ate some food with Sarah and Maria Tobon's family. But one specific like experience that still sticks with me is we were eating arepas, which are like a corn cake, and chicharrón, which is like a pork rind, fried pork rind. And her father was like, "You have to try it this way." So he took a arepa, he grabbed the chicharrón and folded that up over it and squeezed it so all the fat would get all over it. And he was like, "Here." And he put it in my mouth. And he was like, you have to eat it this way. And it was just like a funny experience because
That's
I was like, I
awesome.
just met this man an hour ago, and he's giving me this amazing food.
That's awesome.
But I think like that's those types of stories stick with me, where
Yeah.
you see like the humanity of people, the humor. You get to have these personal connections. You see beautiful nature. So I think it's a privilege to be invited to these people's
Yeah.
homes and for them to host us. And
Mhm.
like my goal as a green buyer is never to force my visit on someone. But if they invite me, like I'm 100% gonna say yes to an
Yeah.
invitation. And it always like brings me back to my upbringing in like rural Ecuador and just in general in South America to see like hospitality and eat food with people, go hiking, and just like see coffee farms in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What's an experience that you are seeing like people in coffee in the U.S. who get to produce or who get to participate in the development camp? What's an experience that they get to have that you think is like super vital to
Yeah.
just being a part of this industry?
Yeah. So from this last trip, I'm trying to think. Some of the first experiences for people were like being in like an actual plot of land where
Mm.
coffee trees were growing all around you, and just like walking and getting brushed by these coffee trees and seeing coffee cherries. And I think it's always special for like coffee professionals to taste the coffee cherry.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of fruit for you to like chew because the seed takes up most of the volume of the fruit, but like you take like a really ripe cherry and you squeeze the seeds out, and all that juice like goes into your mouth,
Yeah.
and you get to taste like the like sweetness and some of the herbaceous character of coffees.
Mm.
That's really special, I would say.
I'm
It's like
sure.
everyone's first coffee cherry. um Smelling coffee flowers, I would say, is pretty unique too, because they range from like jasmine to orange blossom. And usually, like most places, you're not going to have coffee flowers and cherries on the tree at the same time. But because of Colombia's location close to the equator and because of just climate change, there's been a lot of mixture of harvest where you have like all stages of coffee on a tree at the same time.
Interesting.
So you might have a flower, you may have a tiny little green, what's going to be a coffee cherry. You
Mm.
might have medium ripeness, overripe, a little bit of everything. It shouldn't be like that,
No.
but with climate change and the variation of weather and different varieties ripening at different rates, that happens.
Interesting.
Usually it's like a sign of stress on the coffee plant
Huh.
if it's doing like all of that at the same time. Ideally, at least from my understanding, you have flowering, and then when the flowering's done and it's like cross-pollinated with
Mm.
itself, you have a tiny fruit that is formed, and that fruit grows, and depending on the type of variety, it goes from green to eventually a darker, deep purple or red. So it's kind of cool to sometimes see it all on the same tree,
Yeah.
but that does bring some like pains and like actually picking the coffee, because you could be picking cherries and accidentally knock off flowers that are eventually going to be next year's harvest.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like hard to do all
I'm
that.
sure.
But I would say that's a great experience, is people trying coffee cherries, walking on a coffee farm and the steep slopes, because most places where coffee is grown is also very mountainous.
Yeah.
And you just stand there or stand on top or on the bottom, and you look down or up this hill, and you just wonder like, how do these people pick fruit off these trees? Because it's so steep.
Yeah.
Especially in a country like Colombia, where it's not mechanized because of the, topography.
For sure.
A lot of coffee producing countries depend on like migratory labor. So people coming from different parts of the country
Mm.
to pick in different regions. Or if you're like in Central America, you might be in a Costa Rica, and there might be people from Panama who migrate to Costa Rica once a year just for the harvest and
Interesting.
then go back. Um, and a lot of that labor on a coffee farm,
Mm.
from our perspective as like a consumer or even a professional, we might only attribute it to like the name on the bag, if
Mhm.
there's a name on the bag. Sometimes it might just be, Colombia, attributed to a whole country. Um, but you would see that name because that's the person that like owns the farm or their family owns the farm. But there's so many people along the way that have like helped it get to that point,
Yeah.
whether it's like the pickers, the people helping process coffee, just the like, workforce behind it. And that's been kind of an issue in like all of Latin America for the last few years is like the lack of manual labor or lack of like people who can do it because younger people have moved away from wanting to do that work.
Yeah.
Or their families have migrated to other countries. So that's always like a pain point.
Yeah.
So you see different farmers take different routes to addressing that problem. Obviously, you might paint a picture where you're like, this person's a coffee farmer, so they pick all their coffee and they process all their coffee. But in reality, it takes like a lot of people to do all that work. Just like us as a roaster, we might have a bag of coffee that like has our brand on it, but that like doesn't show the full story of like, oh, so and so bagged this coffee, or no, so and so shipped this coffee for me, so and so bagged this coffee, this person roasted it, this person sourced it, this person grew it, this person picked the cherry off the tree.
Yeah.
There's like hundreds of hands between like a coffee plant and then like our final cup.
That's
And that will always fascinate me.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is like one of the coolest examples of a labor of love.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What is something that you wish that just the average consumer knew about coffee?
Sure. I think just how much hard work is behind it. Because of how much coffee is like grown worldwide and how, it's still treated as a commodity. It's seen sometimes as like, why doesn't this coffee cost less? Why can't it be just like $1?
Yeah.
I wish people started to view it more as like a specialty product, like they view
sure.
wine, because it does take a lot of work, and depending on the quality of that work, that coffee is really special. But I think even coffees that are like not really loud and vibrant still take a lot of work to produce, and they still have like their own story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think I really want people to just like go down the route investigating like, where does coffee come from, how much work it takes to maintain that, and just how many trials like a farmer might go through, a producer might go through, and even like maybe less so like on the side of like a consuming country. There's a lot of work that like a roaster or a cafe puts into like perfecting that final beverage for someone.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really cool. Cool. Well, a few last things. I would love to hear if there's anything that you wanted to shout out from Expo this year, or fun experience,
Yeah.
somebody you got to meet that you had been wanting to, anything in
Sure.
between. Would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I think this expo seemed different than previous years. I missed last year's in Houston, but I had been to Chicago, Portland, Boston. So I had been to 3 other expos. This one seemed bigger, but also better organized.
Yeah.
And there was still like really good energy in the air. My focus at this expo was connecting with people we already buy coffee from. And I didn't get to connect with everyone that was there, that was like in our supply chain before us. A special experience specific to that is the producer whose coffee is in our Brazil signature label, Luis Saldana. He's the president of the Brazilian SCA.
Oh, wow.
I got to meet him thanks to Michael Montante, who is the owner of an importer called La Baia.
Okay.
So it was cool from that side or that perspective to see someone that's like so important to the industry of one country, and to be able to hand him a bag of coffee that has his coffee in it, and he still got super excited and loved the like floral print on the bag. He loved the name. So his coffee is currently in our Belly Warmer blend, and he thought Belly Warmer was the funniest name ever. So seeing someone like that you would think is like too important for you, get excited about a product is really cool.
Yeah.
on the flip side of that, like the same people that I was talking about earlier, Sarah and Maria Tabong, were there with Unblended, and we got to brew coffee along their side and their coffee specifically. So it was cool. Like one thing is like tasting that coffee at the farm with the producer or like even in the same country, but being able to like collectively serve that coffee together to people was a really cool experience.
That's really cool.
I think I missed out on like a lot of the innovative things happening, like new products and whatnot, because I was so focused on the people there. I know there was some cool new products launched, like Akaya has their new lid that decompresses
Yes.
the pressure inside a coffee cup, and it's supposed to change the aromatic and flavor experience. I didn't get to play around with that, but I saw it from a distance, and you know,
Every time.
Fellow launched their new espresso machine.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
We got to be a part of like sort of a launch with Breville. Breville's like a umbrella for a lot of different companies. So they own Lilite, which is an Italian espresso
I did not know that.
maker company.
Yeah.
And so we got to make coffee on one of their new machines
Okay.
that has like a flow control paddle on it.
Oh.
And that was really fun to like show people how the paddle changes the amount of water that's going in. And there's a lot of proprietary knowledge behind how that works. But my understanding is that the paddle is affecting the power that goes through the pump, and therefore it's slowing down or speeding up the flow of the coffee coming out of the machine.
Interesting.
So I got to brew some of our Rwanda Juru for some people on there. And I was doing some like Slayer styled shots with like lower pressure. Actually, yeah, with lower pressure, helping bloom the shot of espresso.
Yeah.
And then ramping up the pressure to like make a faster shot happen.
That's so cool.
So that was really fun to do.
Yeah.
And I would say that that was like innovative. I know some of my team worked at the Hario booth and brewed with the Hario Neo that launched recently. And that was really fun. But in general, just like seeing people that we worked with was really special to me.
Yeah. That's so cool. Who is somebody that you got to see while you were there that you were super excited to see?
Yeah. There's so many different people
Yeah.
I was with.
Fair.
Like, man, I'm trying to think of like one story to highlight. I think Kenny, who owns a company named Higa Coffee
Okay.
out of Rwanda.
Okay.
This was the first year that we bought coffee through his company, and the first time that I got to meet him in person. I know he's attended some events in the U.S. before, and that was before, I think even before I worked at Methodical. That he and I got to meet while we were there in person, and I really like coffee from East Africa. Rwanda, Uganda, Congo. All those coffees are like newer and exciting to me. So just getting to meet Kenny in person was a really cool experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What about those coffees excite you?
I think what's really exciting about Rwandan coffee is you have this almost like common denominator, which is like all the coffee there that's specialty is all from the same red Bourbon variety.
Interesting.
Because the government like controls that to some degree. But because of that, you get to see the difference in processing much more clearer, because you can be like, this is all red Bourbon. This might be from the same hill, the same mountainside, same community, but it's been processed this way as a honey or as a washed coffee. And you can really tell the difference that processing makes. Because red Bourbon is really sweet and has a really good structure on its own, in my opinion, just as a washed coffee. But it's a really cool, like, blank slate for, like, naturals and for honey process.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Cool deal. Well, wanted to wrap by doing, like, rapid definitions, if you will.
Okay.
So, for people who don't know anything on, like, the roasting side of things, or coffee origin, how would you describe the importance of, like, origin, country, elevation, and variety? We'll start there.
Okay. So different origins because of their geographic location
Hmm.
and their how close or how relatively close they are to the equator. Have different microclimates at different altitudes, and they might have different varieties. Which for varieties, think of like let's think about like an apple where there's like Macintosh or Pink
Hmm.
Lady or Golden Delicious. The same kind of thing happens in coffee where we have these specific species of coffee that we are used to like consuming, like
Hmm.
Arabica, maybe if you've tried it before, Robusta, and if you bought our release this week, Liberica, those are species of
Yeah.
coffees. But in general, most of specialty coffee has been made up of like Arabica varieties under the umbrella of Arabica. So in general, you could have heard of like Bourbon or Typica,
Hmm.
and then there's a whole lot of other varieties that fall under there that might be Ethiopian landrace varieties, or they might have come to notoriety because of Panama, like Geisha, which is
Hmm.
originally from Ethiopia, but really came to fame in Panama.
Yep.
Or you might have varieties that like are localized, like I was saying, the red Bourbon in Rwanda. Other places have Bourbon, and red referring to the ripeness of the coffee is red,
Hmm.
because you have yellow Bourbon, which is another variety that when it's ripe is a bright yellow.
Interesting.
Um, so different countries because of their microclimates and their soil types
Hmm.
and the weather patterns have different advantages or disadvantages. So you might have Brazil, who has a really large corner on the market because of the amount of land that they have. They
Hmm.
have a lot of room to grow coffee, and the growing regions can be in general flat, so they can mechanize a lot of their picking of coffee and they can produce a lot more coffee. But you still have very beautiful microclimates there that have their differences in the weather patterns, differences in the soil type, and therefore different varieties do
Yeah.
better. Um, and you might have a country like Colombia that has a lot of different regions with a lot of diversity, where depending on how dry it is, how wet it is year round, the temperature,
Hmm.
they might focus on different types of processing. Um, Or you might have a country like Kenya that is known for like their SL varieties, which are like lab developed varieties of coffee,
Gotcha.
not genetically engineered, but
Hmm.
just developed in a lab, specific for that actual environment.
Interesting.
So a lot of times, like different countries are going to taste different,
Hmm.
not only like because of how you roast it, light, medium, or dark, but because of the microclimate, but especially because of the variety. So the variety holds like this genetic code that has flavor precursors
Hmm.
that coffee can produce in the end in your cup. So by roasting, you break down those byproducts. You break down those precursors into byproducts, and because of different varieties and how well they settle into the soil, they can have different flavors in the end.
Awesome.
And those different varieties do different things in different soils. They might not be adapted to certain
Yeah.
altitudes. In terms of like altitude in general, like it really depends on the climate, not just like how high or how low the coffee farm is located at.
Hmm.
So different varieties are adapted to different climates. So the lower you are in altitude, typically the hotter the average temperature throughout the day is.
Hmm.
So this coffee needs to be resistant to like dryness. The higher you are, like typically it's more moist. Sometimes you have volcanic soil. Sometimes the temperature is cooler throughout the day.
Gotcha.
And some varieties do better at higher
Hmm.
altitudes versus like lower altitudes.
All cool
Yeah.
stuff. That's so cool. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm still like, obviously it's gonna take forever to learn, but
I think anyone can learn about it.
entering that journey, you know. But I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Well, as we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to share that you're excited about, just personally, any projects that you're working on, or anything within Methodical that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I think we have some collaborations coming up with a roaster called Brandywine in Delaware. We're working on a little project with them through Unblended. we're always working on like our new releases. We have like a release calendar that right now is internal, but basically each month we release 2 new coffees that might
Gotcha.
be re-releases from previous years, that we only have seasonally, or they might be entirely new coffees to our menu. That's always exciting for me. And yeah, I think a lot of what I want to focus on this year and for the next few years is just collaborating with people in the Greenville coffee community,
Yeah.
um, and having like an open room for discussion for like the coffee culture in Greenville and for us all to like be in community together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I support that all day.
Yeah.
Cool deal. Well, Austin, thank you so much. I really do
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time and your expertise and everything in between.
Thank you.
And this beautiful cup that we had today. What was it that we drank?
So we drank a coffee from Pitalito Huila, grown by Frankie Hoyos, but it was a thermal shock and yeast inoculated coffee.
Let's go. And it was awesome. Cool deal. Well, thanks so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
For sure. Anytime.